Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and if you watched the channel yesterday, you probably already know that a huge announcement was made by Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau about the future of pandemic support benefits here in Canada. But shortly after that press conference that we covered yesterday, and I'll link the video right here if you didn't already see it, shortly after that press conference, the Ministry of Finance, they put out a press release with a little bit more information in text form, so we get a little bit more clarity here on what they actually have defined and what we still need to wait on in terms of future information before we can know more about this new benefit that's being created. So in today's video, we're going to go through the press release that details all of the changes that were announced yesterday in text format, so we get a little bit more clarity here on which programs are being extended, which ones are being cut, which new programs are being created, as well as the language they're using to describe these programs ahead of them actually being implemented. And finally, we're going to take a look at what Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are saying about this announcement, and it's causing a little bit of drama, and as a result of that drama, we're going to get into some of my thoughts and my opinions on what I think is likely to happen when they actually get back to the House of Commons and start debating this stuff based on what I've seen in the past from these various political parties. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to the channel down there in the description, and if you use any of those links in the description, it helps support the channel further, so I'd appreciate you doing that. But let's get into this official press release from Chrystia Freeland and the Ministry of Finance. So this first press release goes over all of the changes that were announced yesterday, and then there's a second press release that gets into more details about the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, this new benefit that's being created. We're going to get into the details of those criteria, but we're starting here with some of the other changes that have been made, and one of the key things to note here is that they talk a lot about moving from very broad-based supports, like the CRB going out to lots of different people, to more targeted measures. This is the theme that the Liberals are going for, saying, hey, instead of these programs that are sort of looser with their eligibility criteria, we're really going to hone in here and make it more difficult to be eligible and make it really targeted on the people that the Liberals at least think are the ones that need the most help. And if I scroll down here a little bit, we get a list of some of these things that they're going to try to change. The first one is the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, or CRHP. They want to extend this until May 7th, 2022. Essentially, this is one of the programs that they said was going to be what they transitioned to after CRB, right? And this program is something that business owners can apply for to get them more funding if they hire more people back or give more hours to existing employees. But one of the main criticisms here is that for this support of jobs to make its way to Canadians, well, it's on the business owners to actually apply and take up this benefit, and we don't have much data right now on how many are actually doing so. And this theme of using more targeted measures instead of broad-based measures is not just for individuals, but it's also for various businesses. We have the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, Canada Wage Subsidy. These are all sort of transitioning into these new programs, the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program and the Hardest Hit Business Recovery Program. Again, a little more difficult to be eligible for, and as a result, there's likely less funding going into these things, as well as like a lockdown support here, a temporary new local lockdown support, where they can actually be eligible for the full amount of the wage subsidy and rent subsidy programs as they were previously if a new local lockdown comes into place. But here's where we get into the section that's about supports for individuals that anyone who's eligible for individually can apply for. Here's the first point that they made. They want to extend the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit and the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit until May 7th, 2022, and increase the maximum duration of benefits by 2 weeks. This would extend the caregiving benefit from 42 to 44 weeks and the sickness benefit from 4 to 6 weeks. So, and I emphasized this yesterday, even though they're extending it until May 7th, 2022, if you were someone who was eligible for one of these benefits previously during the pandemic and you had exhausted all of these benefits, applied for all the various periods that you could, well, this isn't really an actual extension all the way to May 7th. You're getting 2 additional weeks, depending on the benefit. That could be 1 period. I believe the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit is actually in 1 week period, so that would be 2 different application periods. But either way, the extension is only 2 weeks for each of these programs. They're saying that because of children being vulnerable because they're not able to be vaccinated yet, as well as like people still needing to stay home if they're feeling sick. That's why they're extending these benefits, and they've left the CRB out of this extension. And another key thing here to note in the language that they're using, because it's very important to look into the fine details of the language that's being used when they're putting these things out to get some more clarity, and that's all right here, this small word, the government proposes to. You have to understand that these announcements aren't 100% guaranteed, because in order order to make changes that are as big as this, the government first needs to debate it in the House of Commons and get support from another party. Because we're in a minority government, they need to get that support from an additional party before they're able to pass it through the House of Commons and then send it off to the Senate for further approval. So all of these things that are being said could be debated and could be changed based on the debate around the legislation that's tabled in order to actually make these changes once we get back into the House of Commons here November 22nd. What I'm going to do at the end of the video is go over my opinion on what I think is likely to happen based on what I'm hearing from the NDP and other parties, but we'll get to that in just a moment. And the brand new benefit that they're creating is the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, which would provide $300 a week in income support to eligible workers should they be unable to work due to a local lockdown anytime between October 24th, 2021, when these previous slate of benefits is set to end, and May 7th, 2022. This $300 a week rate is around what the CRB is right now. You'll remember that it transitioned from $1,000 per period down to $600 per period, per 2-week period, which is the same as this Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, and likely it would be sort of structured in the same way, where when you get $300 per week, you actually get 10% of that withheld each week, leading you to $270 per week-long period that you apply for, because the CRA likes to sort of hold back that 10% so that you're not having as large a tax bill, because this will all likely be taxable income. And along these lines, because this is the brand new benefit that's being put into place, we have a second press release all about the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit. So we're going to get some more details here, but there are still some question marks. I'm going to get into that as well. But they're saying here that they want to make adjustments to these pandemic income support programs to reflect the new phase of the recovery. They're moving from broad-based programs to more narrowly targeted support. This is the theme, again, we're seeing both in businesses and in individual supports. But here we get some more details specifically about this Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit. They say the new benefit would be $300 per week. We know that. Here's where it gets interesting. We get some more details. Only available to workers where their work is interrupted by the direct result of a government-imposed public health lockdown. Again, we knew the availability, May 7th, 2022. Accessible for the entire duration of that government-imposed public health lockdown, and available to all workers, and this is a little bit interesting as well, all workers who are ineligible for employment insurance and those who are eligible for EI, as long as they are not paid benefits through EI for the same period. So if you're someone who's eligible for EI and you have claimed EI and you're currently on EI and have received that same period, likely under this new Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, if you've received funds in that same period, you're not going to be able to be eligible for EI. Or rather, not eligible for EI, but not eligible for the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit. But the interesting thing here actually is that they're saying that people who are eligible for EI could be eligible for this Canada Workers Lockdown Benefit. Now, this is different from the CRB, CRSB, CRCB. In those situations, if you were eligible for EI, you were forced to apply for EI first before you were transitioned into the CRB program. Anyone who was eligible for EI had to be on EI, not CRB. This is not the same for the Canada Workers Lockdown Benefit. If there's, say, a 2-week lockdown in a specific area in Canada, you wouldn't have to go through the lengthy process of qualifying for EI. Instead, you may be able to lean on the Canada Workers Lockdown Benefit, even if you are technically eligible for EI. A big change from what the CRB was like. And then these final 2 points here on the page, they say that individuals whose loss of income or employment is due to their refusal to adhere to a vaccine mandate would not be able to access this benefit, because that wouldn't be included in the description of what a government-imposed lockdown is. And then the final point here is that they're going to provide further details on this proposed benefit in the coming weeks. We're certainly going to get more information once this legislation is tabled and actually in the House of Commons. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because as soon as we get that document, I'm going to bring that information directly to you. And it can be some pretty dense legal speak. So I kind of do a little bit of investigative work and go in there and find out what's really going on. And again, I'll emphasize this, the language is proposing. They need to first put this legislation forth and then get some debate around it. And because we voted in a minority government in this past election, the Liberals a minority, we pretty much have essentially the same sort of distribution of power across different political parties as we did before the election, to the same as what we have now. This is going to be very interesting, because typically we've seen a little bit of pushback against the Liberals, especially lately in the House of Commons, whenever they try to table new legislation that some of the other parties aren't entirely happy with. And this seems like it's going to be one of those situations where not all of the other parties are happy with the decisions that are being made, and there will likely be some pushback. Let me show you what Jagmeet Singh and Peter Julian, two NDP members of parliament, Jagmeet, of course, the leader of the party, have to say about this recent announcement. Here we have Peter Julian's statement saying the incomprehensible decision by Justin Trudeau to cut off 800,000 Canadian families from CRB this weekend in the midst of a deadly fourth wave will mean even more misery during this pandemic, and there's going to be even more homelessness and even longer food bank lineups. Despicable. So a strong stance taken by one of the NDP members of parliament, and we have a similar thing with Jagmeet Singh here, saying Justin Trudeau is cutting help for people in the middle of a fourth wave. He has the power, this is important, he has the power to extend help to those who depend on it, but has chosen not to. Canadians deserve a government that will fight for them, not leave them behind. New Democrats will fight for you. And this is right along the sort of messaging that the NDP have really been pushing since before the election and during the election, that when push comes to shove, they're going to be the ones that sort of push back against the Liberals and fight for what they believe Canadians deserve. But of course, the NDP have been accused of propping up Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government because when push comes to shove in certain situations, the NDP have voted in favor of Liberal bills to get them passed when the Bloc Québécois and the Conservative Party weren't able to vote in favor of those bills for the Liberals. So a little bit of criticism there, even though Jagmeet Singh and the NDP and other MPs from the NDP are really pushing hard against this decision, which they seem to think is a bad one. And as a disclaimer, this last little bit is entirely my opinion. I have no insider information on what will actually happen or what these parties are thinking, but just based off of my sort of understanding of the way things work and what I've watched over the past year of covering this stuff, here's what I think is going to happen. Now, November 22nd, that's the day that the House of Commons is set to resume. I think a lot of members of Parliament are frustrated that Justin Trudeau has sort of pushed back this date so long until November 22nd, when they were supposed to sort of get back into work or get back to the House of Commons here in October, pushed back to November 22nd. I think there's going to be frustration, from a lot of members of Parliament around this fact, and it sort of falls in line with what a lot of other members of Parliament have criticized of the Liberal government during their last cycle of being in power prior to this election. Their issue was that, hey, you're bringing in all of these critical legislation pieces, things that will see either people getting support or getting no support, and saying, hey, if we don't pass this now with not much debate, well, you will be the ones who are guilty for not allowing benefits to go out to people when they may need them because you're not willing to pass our legislation. You can see how the NDP are backed into a corner here, even though they traditionally are fighting for more support for Canadians, being more generous with these benefits. If the Liberals table this legislation and the NDP don't like it, they can push back as much as they want, but at the end of the day, the Liberals can say, hey, well, NDP, it's your choice. You either support our bill and Canadians get some benefits, or you take your moral high ground saying Canadians should be more supported, don't vote in favor of the bill, and as a result, Canadians will get no additional support, no benefits. So it's kind of a little bit of a tricky situation politically here. And one of the tricky things about this Canada Workers Lockdown benefit is if there's anyone who's eligible for it right now in October, transitioning off of the CRB, well, they're not going to be able to apply for it, even though technically the Canada Workers Lockdown benefit will be starting on October 24th. It won't actually come into place until they can get this all passed through legislation. So it's only technically starting on October 24th, and you'll be able to apply for it retroactively if you are eligible. But again, we're not going to see this come into place until likely December, when they can actually get this passed through the House of Commons and have all the committee meetings go through this lengthy process. So there's going to be a stretch of time here where people who are currently on the CRB and who may be eligible for this new benefit, we don't know, we don't have the details. Well, even if they were eligible, you're not going to be able to apply, or you're only going to be able to apply retroactively if you were eligible. If you understand what I'm saying here, it has to be passed through the House of Commons before you can start applying for it. So this is likely to leave a lot of people pretty frustrated, and I think that's punctuated by what the NDP are talking about here on Twitter. But I'm curious about what you think around this whole issue. Let me know down in the comments, and as a quick reminder, I will never ask you to contact me on WhatsApp or contact me via a phone number. There are tons of scammers in the comments who are actually impersonating me, putting my picture as their profile picture to try to convince viewers that I'm the one commenting. So whenever you see that, just give that a quick little report, but let me know down there, and I'll read as many as I possibly can get to. And while you're down there, check out all the links in the description. The Canada Money Master Mastery program, a great way to learn how to invest and set yourself up for the future. Also, you can open up investing accounts, Wealthsimple, 2 free stocks when you sign up, and you can sign up to purchase cryptocurrency as well in the description. Whenever you use those links, they help support the channel. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.